All right, everybody. It is 6:30. That means it is time to go. I'm excited to share this with you. I've gone into the chat already. If you haven't been there, go in there because I've left you with. There's three links in there that you're going to need for tonight. The first one is a cheat sheet that you can download and print that will have all of these numbers that we talk about. The second one is an in-depth blog post for everybody to go. It's more of it gets in a little bit more detail. I realize we have a difficult thing here we need to cover tonight. And the reason why it's difficult because it just gets very, very boring when we're going through, line by line, what's on these lab tests. But I'm going to do my best to make it exciting and make it fun. Just no guarantees because it can get a little bogged down. And then the last one is a link of how to order. And my lighting in here is terrible tonight, but it is what it is. It's 6:30 and it's, getting blinded from the sun. So you've got those links there in the chat, and you're more than welcome to answer questions as we get going with this. I'd love to have your feedback, but some of them might just wait till the end. So anyway, let's dive into tonight's topic, which is what I'm calling TruCore Labs. TruCore is a name that I've come up with. You're going to start to see all my stuff actually be branded TruCore Labs here in the near future, but this is specifically for these metabolic labs that we're going to talk about tonight. So I'm going to start off with the pitch right from the get-go. I can't stand personally sitting through webinars and hearing somebody's spiel and sitting there and wondering to myself, well, how much is this going to be? How much is this going to be? How much is it going to charge? So we're just going to talk about that right now. The lab tests that we talk about trying to get all 45 of them, it's $197. And what that's going to include is all of the labs that we go through, a functional interpretation with me. Like I'll sit down with you, whether that's on the phone or that's in the office. We'll go over what they mean. I'll give you a report. But keep in mind the actual price is $249. But I reduced it on purpose because you're going to have to spend a little bit of cash to actually get someone to take the blood out of your arm. I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to do that yet. I know that Express Labs here in town, they'll do it for you. My own lab kits are actually on its way. So once I get that figured out, whoever wants this, I'll work with you individually until we kind of get some of those kinks out. But there is a reduction in the fees to cover what it will cost to get someone to take the blood out of your arm for you. And then, this particular test that we're talking about, insurance would actually charge over $1,000 for these same tests because they are what they are. They're the racket that marks things up way more expensive than they actually need to be. So just keep that in mind. If we take the insurance factor out of it, it makes it much, much cheaper. Many more details on that to follow. So, but here's the deal. I love you guys, but let's not waste each other's time. I don't want to sit and go through old blood work that's incomplete, that's not all there. So I know some of you are going to come to me and say, well, I've got this test done. Oh, that's great. I charge $150 to look at old blood work. So you might as well just get new ones and start fresh. So I just want to say that from the beginning. So everything, I got a thing covering up let me get that down. So what do you do when you go to the blood and you get blood drawn and everything on your blood test looks like it's normal, but something's still off because you've got fatigue, you've got brain fog, you've got stubborn weight, you're not sleeping well. The doctor looks at your labs and says that they're fine. The standard lab tests, the issue is they're only going to detect disease. They're not going to look at dysfunction before it actually becomes disease. So typically what will happen is in your annual blood work, they're just not going to look at enough markers. And I'm going to show you which ones you should look at. They're just going to look at the bare minimum because that's what insurance will pay for to keep you alive. And literally that's their job, is just to keep you alive. It has nothing to do with actual vitality. So they look at those and then they look at these numbers that are at a bell curve. And so you look at the bell curve and they're taking the very ends of the bell curve and saying, well, this is lab high, this is lab low. The problem is they're comparing that blood work to everybody else who's done blood work in that lab, that particular lab in the past. So what ends up happening is what is called normal is based off of sick people. So normal, if you want to be normal, like I've always said, like if you want to see normal, go to Walmart. Hey, so we base it off of sick people saying, yeah, you're fine. But in reality, we could be off on the inside numbers, on the functional numbers that we're going to talk about tonight. That's where you could be off, and you've got an issue there that we can cut, that we can deal with ahead of time versus just saying, hey, let's wait till it becomes a problem, and then we're going to treat it or cure it. Which, by the way, the words treat and cure, they were both owned by pharmaceutical companies. No one else can treat or cure anything except for those guys, just so you know. But they treat or cure it with medications. Oh yeah, by the way, if you want this to be cured, you've got to take this drug for the rest of your life. So we don't want it to become that. We want to head that off at the pass, and this is going to help us to help you to do that. So what your doctor isn't telling you, that the labs that they order that are on your annual that insurance pay for is that CBC, the Chem panel that we're going to talk about tonight, and maybe a thyroid stimulating hormone panel. Yeah, it's great. Insurance will pay for it, but the reality is if you just went to the lab and paid cash, you're talking about $20 worth of lab tests here. They're not expensive. And the labs know it. The insurance companies know it. What'll happen. And so the labs will charge the insurance companies a massive increase in their fees because they can. And they don't pass that on to you, which is infuriating. But insurance inflates lab costs. They charge a fortune, and it ends up that you're actually paying for those in your premiums and not getting what you need because we're still relying on those people. Results are judged on averages of sick people. We've discussed that. You're told you're fine when you know deep down that you're not. So let's take a deeper, smarter look at your health. We're going to talk about 45 lab markers tonight. We're going to talk about functional ranges for optimal health. I've given you those functional ranges. They're in that cheat sheet. The link is in the chat. You can go download those there. A full interpretation and personalized recommendations. And if you're watching this as a repeat, I will put it in the description of the video. But that's what we're going to talk about here. Take a real deep dive into what it actually means. So this isn't just another lab panel. We're going to run more markers than your doctor orders. We're going to interpret for function, not just for disease. We're not going to mess around or fuss with insurance. We're just going to tell you how it is. And then we're going to give you some real answers that you can actually act on. And so here is what we test, and here's why it matters, okay? Vitamin D and vitamin B12. And anytime tonight when you see me put an asterisk on any of these tests, that means that these are not part of a normal blood panel. So you have to ask the doctor what you get those. And a lot of them won't even run them because they're not covered by insurance, even though these two tests together are like $30, okay? High sensitivity CRP, unless you have an autoimmune disease, no one's going to look at CRP, which is an inflammatory marker. We're going to look at it in this lab test. A full CBC with differential. Yes, these get ordered all the time. And the numbers, what they're looking at your white blood cells, and they're also looking at red blood cells for anemia patterns. Actually, they don't look for anemia patterns. They just look to see if these are within lab ranges. And if they're not, they might say you're anemic and just throw you on iron, even though there's about 12 different types of anemia. We're going to talk about lipid panels. I won't get into this a whole lot with HDL, LDL, and triglycerides, other than all of these things are increases when you have abnormal blood sugar. And if you're taking drugs to lower your cholesterol, you need to look what the long-term effects of those are, because there is an absolute reason why we're seeing an increase in Alzheimer's and dementia, and it has to do with statin medications. Complete metabolic panel, liver, kidney, glucose, electrolytes. We're going to look at all those. And then we're going to get into a little bit of hormones tonight, talk about hormones, estrogen and testosterone, and then some thyroid function, and then fasting insulin. So that's the direction that we're going. Again, if there's an asterisk by the test, that means your doctor wouldn't order this unless you specifically ask for it. And even if you ask for it, they may not do it because the lab will charge that astronomical price versus just, hey, here's the lab test of what they really are. So the cheat sheet is going to help you understand every marker. It compares the standard versus functional ranges, and you can use it to track your health over time. One thing that I haven't done, so if you're watching this live, I haven't done this yet, is taken the actual blog post, the lengthened blog post that I put in the chat box. I'm going to turn that into something you could actually print and have the information in front of you over time. So If you're watching this afterwards, then I've probably done it. There's probably a link in the description. If I haven't, or if you can't find it, just text me. So let's get into it. This is the boring part. I am going to try my best to just get through these, especially ones that are pretty normal tests. Your time's valuable, my time's valuable. I want to get through these and help you understand what they are. So starting from the top, these are just, this is literally cut and pasted out of your cheat sheet. So you have this. WBC stands for white blood cells. When we're looking at white blood cells, we're looking for an immune response. And if you look at the nitty gritty, we can start narrowing down what type of immune response we're having so we know how to manage whatever that immune response is. But off the top, on the left, you see functional ranges. On the right, you see lab ranges. So an immune response, white blood cells, you should have about between 5.0 to 8.0 per microliter times 10 to the third per microliter, which is a pretty big number. And then functional ranges, I said that wrong. Lab ranges are on the left, functional ranges on the right. So if you're falling out of range on either one of those, we're probably dealing with some sort of infection, one way or the other, depending on what they are from lab to high to low. RBC is red blood cells. The number one function of your red blood cells is to transport oxygen. So if we're starting to see different numbers in your red blood cell counts, we might have some sort of anemia pattern that's developing or happening. The labs, they look at 4.2 to 5.8. We're going to look at 4.5 to 5.5, so a little bit tighter range there. Hemoglobin is the part of the red blood cell that actually carries the oxygen. That's very, very important, especially when we are dealing with oxygen delivery. You could have a low hemoglobin count. And then there's the numbers there, 13.0 to 17.7 is lab. Functional range is 13.5 to 15.5. So you could be out of range there and you just don't have enough hematocrit or hemoglobin to carry your iron, and carry your oxygen. And every single cell that you have in your body requires oxygen. So we want to make sure that that's nailed down and squared away. Hematocrit, this is an interesting one. Hematocrit is RBC percentage. So basically with hematocrit, what they do is they put your blood into a centrifuge and they spin it down. And then your red blood cells sink to the bottom and your plasma is left up on top, which plasma is important to us in regenerative medicine because we can take that plasma and put it back into you and help your arthritic joints to heal. But in this particular case, it has a lot to do with the percentage of red blood cells you have and also hydration, which, interesting enough, the functional levels here are 40 to 48%. And that's like 40% of the tube is red blood cells, and then 60 would be plasma. In Idaho, these numbers are actually higher because we're at a higher elevation. And when you're at a higher elevation, your body makes more red blood cells. So we see higher hematocrits all the time, and we don't worry about them just because of where we are. Mean corpuscular volume is literally just the size of the red blood cells. Baby red blood cells are big, and as they age and die off, they actually become less and less efficient at carrying oxygen. And so mean corpuscular volume is important to us when it comes to actual delivery of oxygen as well. MCH is mean corpuscular hemoglobin. You can see the ranges for that there. Again, we're dealing with hemoglobin, how much hemoglobin your red blood cells actually have. Same thing with MCHC, mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration. Say that 5 times fast. Those two things are pretty nitty gritty. We don't pay a lot of attention to unless we see some of these other numbers. So they just kind of bog us down with what I call nerdum. And then RDW, which is red blood cell distributed width, which basically means what kind of a distribution of red blood cells do we have? Do we have a whole bunch of young ones indicating that we have some sort of anemia that's happening that's making our bodies produce more red blood cells, or disease process, happening to make more red blood cells? Or do we have a bunch of old ones that are tiny, meaning we're not making them? And then we start looking at all those other numbers. So all of those numbers are very intricate. They're all related to each other. It kind of does take just a trained eye to see exactly what's going on. But if you take the information that I've given you you can look at your blood tests and actually start seeing some issues that are happening there that might just come down to we don't have enough B12 or we don't have enough folate or something along those lines. So platelets, it's important to know that number because if you're injured, you need platelets to help you heal. It's also would be great to know if we're going to do something like PRP or platelet-rich plasma injections to know if we have enough to actually help you heal your joints. So neutrophils and neutrophil count. With elevated neutrophils, we're usually looking at some sort of bacterial infection, like you have strep or something along those lines. But you could have some sort of chronic bacterial infection that's only showing up as a little bump that we don't catch in the ranges. And you guys, I'm just going to skip the actual like numbers here because you can read them just as easy as I can. But if your neutrophils are out of range on the high side, we might be dealing with some chronic infection. If they're out of range on the low side, we might be dealing with another type of chronic infection that's making it so you can't produce them. Again, it's just a pattern thing that we want to look at. Lymphocytes and lymphocyte counts. This is the same thing as neutrophils, but we're probably dealing with a more viral thing here. Monocytes, when they're off, it could be an inflammation thing. It could be because you're recovering. It could be because your body is actually trying to clean itself up and get rid of some of those. And then eosinophils, when you see changes in eosinophils, again, these are just types of white blood cells. We want to start thinking about a parasitic infection or allergy responses, which so the longer I practice, the more and more I see people with these parasite issues that are causing a lot of problems. We're doing more and more of those parasite cleanses. So if we see this number as weird, then we'll start talking about doing that. And then histamine is what we look at with basophils. We want to look at those numbers and make sure those types of white blood cells are managed accordingly. So it's not just a matter of throw it up there, look in the high-low column. There's nothing in the high-low column, so it must be fine. Here you go. Now let's look at the intricate numbers and see if we can start to develop some sort of pattern on how we can help you. And the best way to help you is, number one, clean up your diet. And then we start looking at these types of numbers. So getting into the complete metabolic panel, I told you this part was boring, guys. I don't know how to make it any more exciting, but here we are. Creatinine is very important for kidney function. We want to look and see what your creatinine is doing, especially if you're taking a bunch of supplements or medications. That can be an issue. Total bilirubin is something we look at because if your liver's not detoxing appropriately, your bilirubin levels will raise. That'll keep you from losing weight. And then your creatine and blood urea, BUN is blood urea nitrogen. That'll let us know that we're either if we're having enough protein, not too much protein, if we're drinking enough, etc. One near and dear to my heart is GFR, which is glomerular filtration rate, which is a measure of your kidneys, how well they're working. I say it's near and dear to my heart because my lovely wife, who you just saw walk past, she has chronic kidney disease, and we have to keep eyes on how well her kidneys are working because that indicates, what we need to deal with her. And which, by the way, she keeps her lupus and her kidney disease completely at bay just with food. So pretty awesome stuff. Calcium. Calcium is one of those electrolytes that can be thrown off and can really start messing with nerve function. It can also indicate that your bones are breaking down. We've got some hormone issues. AST, ALT, and ALP are all liver enzymes. We want to check those out because if your liver is not flushing out the toxins that you're getting rid of when you go through the program, that can make it so that your weight loss is a little stubborn and makes you feel sluggish. We want to check that as well. Hey, rounding it out, total protein indicates, are you getting enough? Are you breaking it down? Is something happening so that you're actually you're getting rid of too much protein? That could be an issue. Albumin helps us talk about the liver again. Blood urea nitrogen, we've touched on that a little bit. Carbon dioxide is a big one, especially for people who are mouth breathers. You have a tendency of building up carbon dioxide, and that can kind of throw your pH off and throw off everything else when it comes to metabolism, like turning glucose into energy. And then potassium and sodium, we're back to some of those electrolytes that if they're off, that can have their own effects. In fact, sodium depletion is actually one of the main reasons for like intermittent signs and symptoms of a degenerative disorder. It might just be that your electrolytes are off. So we want to look at that. Okay. Told you that one was going to be hard to get through. Let's talk about hormones and metabolism. Let's start with fasting insulin. This test is ridiculous because it literally costs $15, but your insurance won't pay for it unless you're an actual diabetic. But the data tells us that fasting insulin can actually detect diabetes and blood sugar disorders 15 years before it actually shows up as absolute like diabetes. So you can have a perfectly good fasting glucose, but your fasting insulin might be completely off, indicating that we've got an insulin problem, but your glucose is so far staying normal. So a doctor would look at it and say, oh, glucose is normal, must be fine. But under the surface, unless you do this test, then we won't know. And it's important to us because of glucose metabolism, your blood sugar, and because of fat storage. When your insulin levels are too high, you're going to start making fat and you're not going to burn what you have. That becomes problematic. Okay. So there's the normal number 2.0 to 19.6, but the functional number is 2.0 to 8.0. Again, one of those tests you don't know unless you do it, but your doctor won't order it. Estradiol or estrogen. Here's the interesting thing about men and women. When our blood sugar or our fasting insulin is off, men will take estrogen and convert it, men will take testosterone, any excess testosterone that they have, and I'm going to just put it up there, and they'll actually convert that testosterone into estrogen. And then you'll start seeing symptoms like gynecomastia, which is man boobs. You'll start seeing things like crying over commercials or just estrogen dominance in men. But the root cause isn't because they have estrogen dominant. The root cause is because they have a blood sugar issue. And the same thing goes for women. Women can take estrogen, and if their blood sugars are off, they'll take that estrogen and convert it into testosterone. So they'll show up with too much testosterone and not enough estrogen, and it throws them into hot flashes and other that making perimenopause and menopausal symptoms even worse. So it's important to look at these numbers. You know, this is just, your blood's only going to give us a snapshot. And if we see that things are off here, we might want to talk about some more complete testing of these hormones to figure out exactly what's going on. But at least this gives us a snapshot of, okay, what's happening with these people? How can we help them? And what do we need to do? Well, step one is to help with their insulin. And if you're part of the Metabolic Reset program, you're already doing the work. Well, some of you might be doing the work. Some of you need a little motivation. I won't mention any names. But that's the issues there. Okay. And then micronutrients and inflammation, these things like vitamin B12. Nobody ever runs vitamin B12. B12 is huge for brain, for nerve, and for energy. We should be around 600 to 1100 picograms per milliliter. I always laugh at the units that they use. But here's the deal. If you don't have enough, then you're not going to have proper nerve function. You won't be able to make energy. If you have too much, well, guess what? You and I need to talk about energy drinks, because energy drinks put a lot of vitamin B12 into their products, and that might be driving it too hard. So why do you not have enough energy to get through the day without having an energy drink? So that's the conversation that we'll end up having. Vitamin D, it's important for immune, hormone, and inflammation. All of us know that. All of us know that we should be out in the sun, but we live north of Florida, so we're all going to be running chronically low. But we don't know what the levels are until we try. The cool thing about vitamin D is it's needed to produce all of your hormones. And without it, things can be a bit of a mess. So let's test it, figure out what it is, and then we can take action from there. And then lastly is this high sensitivity CRP. This is purely an inflammation marker. We've talked about the symptoms of having high inflammation, not being able to sleep, high cortisol, fat around your belly, waking up in the middle of the night, etc. All signs of an inflammatory response. So why not look at it and say, okay, here's where we are to start with. Let's start breaking it down, seeing where we need to go from there. So, in the lab test, they say 0 to 3.0 is okay. But in functional tests, we say anything greater than 1, you've got an inflammatory problem. And we need to deal with that problem because it's messing up all this other stuff. So I said lastly, there's one more. Let's talk about thyroid and we'll wrap up there. We could really, we could spend all night talking about this, especially if we get bogged down with questions. But the standard American, the way we treat this now is, okay, we look at thyroid stimulating hormone. It's produced by your I should have grabbed a drink. Your brain produces it as a signal from your pituitary gland, your thyroid, to make more T4 and T3. Well, if TSH is low, that means you've got plenty of T4, T3, and you don't need to produce more. I'm going to lose my battery if I don't plug in. Hang on. I was not paying attention to the battery life on my computer here, and I'm going to get in trouble. Do something. And whoever designed this office did not put enough plugs in. I pull that. Okay, sorry about that. I was going to lose you there for a second. Okay, so thyroid stimulating hormone. Basically, your doctor will look at it, and if it's below 0.45, they're going to say, okay, let's put you on, or if it's above 4.5, excuse me, let's put you on some medication, push it back down to normal. Hey, we got it to normal, great, hurrah. Well, what about all the other stuff? There's so many more factors that go into it. Like free T3, they don't look at free T3. This is the active thyroid hormone. Do you have enough of that? Do you have enough storage thyroid hormone? Do you have too much of one and it's not converting into the other? We don't know that until we start looking at the patterns and looking at all these other tests. So it's important that we put these ones in there just to make sure where you're at on that realm, because it could be like 15 other things. And like I said, we could get bogged down with thyroid stuff tonight because it's just incredibly complex. But at the same time, it's super simple. So that's something we need to look at. So as a summary of what we talked about, I encourage you to go to the blog post, read through the blog post. So everything I talked about is in there. Download and print that cheat sheet so you have it. But if you go to that site, you can actually order the panel. I put it here in the chat. It's the one with the blood lab test in it. I'm sitting here circling on my screen like you guys can see it. It's bradywirick.com/home. You go there and you order the panel. And then what'll happen is tomorrow, or when you order that panel, I'm going to enter your information into my lab that will send you the kit that you need to get your blood drawn wherever you are. So it'll get mailed straight to your house. And if you're local, call me because I can help you with this part of it. Then you go into Express Labs and take your blood. So Express Labs will ship it for you. So you'll have it in hand. You're good to go. Then we'll get the results in a week or so. And then once I have the results, I'll reach out to you and we'll set up a time to go through those results. And I'll give you the report. And then once we have that report in hand, we can actually take some action and show how to do what you need to do. And then as life goes on, we do this every 6 months. We do this every year, depending on where you're at, what you need to do. We can make appropriate recommendations. So like I said, the price to do the lab is $197. It's actually a $249 test and service. I took $50 off just to make sure that the price of the lab draw is covered for you. So you're only paying $197. So you use the rest of that money to actually pay for the blood draw. I'm going to figure out how to do this in the office, but for now, we're going to use what we have here at Express Labs. And then for you people who aren't in town or aren't near me, the lab will actually send you a link that you can actually find someone near you. They give you pretty explicit instructions on even scripts on what to say when you call a lab to find it for you. I can help you with that as well. So that includes that price includes everything, the interpretation. Melissa, can our spouse do this as well? Melissa, this is open to absolutely everybody. I'm not going to make this exclusive to the group. Anyone can do this lab. So yes, they can absolutely do that. Just go and you can order it now. There's the website right there, bradywirick.com/home, but it is linked in the chat. You can get it there. If you need me to send it to you directly, just shoot me a text. I'm happy to do that for you as well. So I don't have anything else, guys. I've covered what I wanted to talk about in a lot quicker than I thought I would. But I will stay on here for a few more minutes and answer whatever questions pop up. I am going to shut the recording down. So if you're watching this, thank you on recording. Thank you for joining us. But let's go ahead and cut the recording if I know how. Oh, there's the more button right there. Stop the recording.